Hello and welcome to the first of our Snapcraft office hours. Hopefully you found us despite me giving the wrong month, wrong date, wrong time in various places all over the internet. So hopefully you found us okay. My name's Alan, and with me today are some of my colleagues who work on Snaps and Snapcraft. We've got Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hello.
We've also got Kyle. Hi, Kyle. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Good to see you guys.
Awesome. And we have Leo. Hey, Leo.
Hello.
And you might hear birds tweeting outside. That's probably coming from Leo's feed.
Or cows.
Or cats, yeah, if you see cats wandering by, yeah. So the idea behind this is we're going to show some demos, talk about some news in Snapcraft, and answer your questions as well. So if you have any questions for the Snapcraft experts, then the best place to do that is on Rocket Chat. That's where all of the Snapcraft team hang out. So go to rocket.ubuntu.com, log in or sign up or whatever, and you can join the Snapcraft channel once you log in. So that's rocket.ubuntu.com. Log in, sign up, join the Snapcraft channel, and then ping your questions in there, and we'll keep an eye out for them. We'll do the questions a little bit later, so don't worry, we've got a little bit of time to sign up. You can also follow us on Twitter. If you go to twitter.com/snapcraftio, and also this YouTube channel is youtube.com/snapcraftio. So we've got a few things to cover. First up, I think, Kyle, you've got some news about new things, new developments in Snapcraft. So,
I do, yeah. Actually, here, let me share my screen. I want to show you guys some.
Ooh.
All right, you see that okay?
I see a terminal. That's always a good start.
Yeah. Okay, yes, that is a good start. So the first thing I want to show you is, well, so Snapcraft has always been available as a dev, but that kind of makes it difficult to test things that just landed, right? Or, I mean, you can test an upcoming release with proposed, but what if the feature you want to test isn't actually contained in a release yet? Or you don't really want to use proposed because it's kind of complicated, and the SRU process to get you a new Snapcraft is taking longer than you would like. Well, Snapcraft is now, well, let's try that again, huh? Available as a snap. So this, it hasn't really reached a stable channel quite yet. We're still heavily testing it, but it's getting very close to that. It's totally usable right now. And the latest release, 2.30, right, Leo, is contained in the beta channel. Yeah, so as you can see, I just installed it. And you can use it just like this.
So for those people who don't know, that like Snapcraft has been in the Ubuntu archive, and you've been able to like apt install Snapcraft for months and months and months. But what you're saying here is there's a newer version or a faster iterating version in
right,
the Snap
exactly.
Store. Right.
Yeah. So right now we just finished SRUing 231 back to all of the supported releases, Xenial and up. But that just happened, I think, yeah, the beginning of this week, whereas this snap was in the beta channel a week before because the SRU process takes that long. So if you install the snap, you get it as soon as we cut the release, basically. Not only that, but every new feature that lands on master gets a new build into the Edge channel. Now we'll talk a little more about channels in the tutorial section later.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is if there's a new feature you want to test that isn't contained in a release at all, then you just switch to the Edge channel. And I'll show you an example of that with the second thing I want to talk about, which is a new feature contained in 232, the release that we're going to cut today. Now, if you're familiar at all with the robot operating system, it's a middleware for making robots. It's super cool. I totally recommend you check it out, ros.org. I'm not really wanting to dig deeply into that right now, but we've supported that with a Snapcraft plugin called Kakin from pretty much the beginning. It currently supports 3 ROS releases: Indigo, Jade, and Kinetic. Well, a new ROS release, Lunar, was released just a couple of weeks ago, and you may have tried to use it with like 231 or earlier. And you may have been met with that, right? Because Lunar wasn't actually supported in Snapcraft. Well, if you switch to the Edge channel.
So you're saying the version of Snapcraft didn't support the version of ROS, right?
Right, the newest version of ROS, Lunar. Right. So if you refresh to the Edge channel, and again, this release will be cut today, so you'll be able to use it in the beta channel pretty quick. But this is an example of a feature that isn't contained in a release yet that you can totally consume via the Snap. And really, well, unless you run from source, no other method. So if you use it from Edge, you can totally build a Snap that's based on Lunar. Sweet. And those are really the two things I wanted to talk about. This will take forever. There's no reason to watch it.
Well, see, the thing that's cool about that is, you know, telling the exact story that we keep telling everyone about Snaps is like often for applications that are in repositories, archives, it takes a while for them to get updated unless you're running some, you know, bleeding edge rolling release distribution, but not everyone is. But Snaps here allow you to get the latest release of Snapcraft. So we're like properly, what is it, Martin? We say instead of dog fooding these days is
we drink our own champagne over here.
Yes, that's right. We drink our own champagne. So Snapcraft and the Edge channel, the finest, newest champagne you can get. I'm not sure that analogy still works, but cool. Thank you, Kyle. If anyone has any questions about ROS or the Snapcraft Snap and that kind of stuff, then feel free to jump on Rocket Chat and ask questions. Kyle and Leo are both hanging out there, as do Martin and I.
So one more detail, Kyle showed 231 on the beta channel, and she showed Edge. Today we are releasing the new version to beta. So if you install Edge today, you will be helping us to test the newer release. That's a very nice way to help us make sure that everything's stable.
Yeah, it's cool. I like the fact that you get new stuff arriving all the time in the Edge channel. So I think I'm running Snapcraft from Edge, I think, on some of my machines. And like magically overnight, I'll get new features and stuff, which is, you know, that's really cool. I don't have to worry about stuff. I just get the new crack when you guys land it in the store. It's brilliant. Great. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Leo. So next up, we've got a little tutorial. I'm going to try and drive this one, and everyone is welcome to heckle as we go through this, because I may well get things wrong.
Our tutorials have a theme this week. We're just going to look at snapping Python applications this week. So each week we'll have a different theme in our little bit of show and tell. And if you've got suggestions about what you'd like to see featured in our live demos, then leave your comments in rocket.ubuntu.com today, or in comments underneath this video if you're watching it after it went out live.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. So the example that I've got here is, hopefully you can see my terminal and the text is readable there. What I've got is a little Snapcraft YAML for an application called offlineimap. Now, I love offlineimap. It's a really cool application that lets you synchronize mailboxes from remote hosts down to your local machine. So if you want to back up your email, it's a really, really, really great tool for that. And I wanted to create a snap of it because the developers iterate on it and improve it over time. And I wanted to make sure that I've always got the latest version. So if I just go through, like, this is like one of the simplest Python YAMLs you'll see for Snapcraft, but there are a couple of interesting things to point out. So the first few lines, actually, if I open this in a text editor, it'll be easier for me to. So the first few lines up there is just the metadata. So that's just the description that you'll see in the store when this thing lands in the store. The next interesting thing here is confinement, and this is one of the features of Snaps, is that applications can be confined. So by doing this, having strict confinement, I can be sure that this snap can't break out of the little environment that it's been given by the Snappy runtime. and equally other snaps can't reach into this directory and see what's in this snap. And that's kind of important to me because this thing has a copy of all my email in it. So I think it's important that other snaps can't reach into here and this one can't touch other things. So I'm using strict confinement. An app section, which I'll get back to in just a sec, but down here, I have two parts for this. Now, ordinarily, I would only have one part for a super simple Python snap, but there's a little quirk with offlineimap which I had to cater for, but it was okay. So down here, you see I've got a part called offlineimap, and it says do this part after you've done another part called setup. So the part above that is called setup, and that will get done first. I'll come back to that in a minute. Underneath that, it says plug in Python. That means that this application is a Python application, and Snapcraft has a plugin called Python, which can handle Python applications. It knows what to do with requirements, setup.py, and all the kind of good stuff you get with Python applications. And specifically, this is a Python 2 application. So I specify Python version Python 2. I think if you Kyle, can you not specify the Python version? Does it default to Python 3, or do you have to specify it?
I believe it defaults to Python 3, but I can double check that.
Okay, cool. But this happens to be Python 2. Sorry, Leo, what was that?
Sorry, a little cold here. Default is Python 3.
Yeah, if you run Snapcraft help Python, you'll see that the Python version defaults to Python 3.
Sweet. So this happens to be Python 2, and I specify the link to the source code where the offlineimap lives because I'm running this on my local machine. As an alternative, I could put this YAML in, commit this upstream to the offlineimap project, and it could live in there upstream. That would be the best thing to do. But just for this demo, I'm running Snapcraft on my local machine, and I'm going to pull the source directly from GitHub. So back up to this other part. Setup. There's a bit of a quirk with the way offlineimap setup runs. So what I've done here is I've said, here's a little dependency, which is also a Python package called 6, which is a Python library that offlineimap needs. So what's going to happen here is when I run Snapcraft, it's going to go and get Python 6, go and get offlineimap, put the two together and put it inside a snap. Now, when a user installs it, they want to be able to run offlineimap. So up here, I have an apps section, which says there's one command inside this snap, and the command is called offlineimap, and it's in the bin directory. So there's only one command. There might be more than one, and in some examples, you'll see lots of them, but in this one, there's just one. And you'll see here, there's a plug called network. And because offlineimap needs to go and talk to an IMAP server to suck down my email, I give it this plug network so that it can communicate over the network. Because it's strictly confined, ordinarily it wouldn't have access. So giving it this plug.
One quick note there.
Yeah.
On your command, Snapcraft by default adds bin, user bin. I think that's actually the only two to your path. So you probably don't need the bin preceding that.
Sweet. Gosh, I learn something new every day. This is awesome. So that's my simple YAML. So all I'll do now, I've currently got Snapcraft installed. I think I have it from, yeah, look at that. I also have it from the Snap, from the store. So I'm going to be running Snapcraft, the Snap version of Snapcraft. And if I just run that in here, the only thing that's in this directory is that YAML. And as soon as I run Snapcraft, it's going to start building my offlineimap snap. Now, this is going to take a little while, so not a huge amount of time.
So what's the pull step that just popped up on the screen there, Kyle?
So Snapcraft works with a number of parts, obviously, as you can see from the YAML that Alan was showing. And it builds a snap by orchestrating all of these parts into a single directory and then making a snap out of that directory. Every part goes through a number of life cycle steps to actually get there. The first one is the pull step, where it actually goes out to, in this case, GitHub, right, and pulls down the source code that he has specified there in the source keyword. After that, you build each part in isolation, except in this case, he uses the after keyword. So it makes sure that the setup part builds and then goes to the stage step, where it's available in this in a stage directory that's available to all parts. And then the offline IMAP part can build with the stage directory. And then it also gets staged. And then the prime step happens where it finally ends up in the directory that does get snapped in the snap step.
So I could have had any number of parts, and each one of them will be pulled. Each one of them would be staged or built and staged. And then finally, the very last step is, once it's done all of those building and staging, then there's one final step to actually put them together.
Right. Yeah. There's so the prime step is where all the snap specific metadata is generated. And maybe in the stage directory you have header files that are used to build other parts. You don't want those in the final snaps. You filter them out for the prime step. And then there's one more step called snap, which is really just running make squash fs on the prime directory.
Okay.
Okay.
One thing to point out from your YAML there is that this isn't replacing any of the familiar tools that Python developers will already be using. So if you've used pip and you've got setup.py in your project, or you've got a requirements file, snaps exploit all of those capabilities that you're already using to construct the Python snap.
Groovy. So it's finally got to the last step. I have to say it's normally much faster than this, but I'm running the Hangout on my machine and my poor laptop is suffering a little bit. So the very last step it's got to here, you're saying is the prime, Kyle, and that's the bit where it actually puts it all to, oh, sorry, the snapping bit is the very last step,
right.
Isn't it? That's what
this is where it's making the squashfs image that is the final snap that you can email to people or upload to the store.
And finally done. So if I just do an ls in here, you can see those directories that you were talking about, the parts, the stage, the prime, and then the final snap. And I can install that directly here. I could just snap install offline IMAP, and I'm going to use the -- dangerous by a store. So yeah, there could be anything inside it. It hasn't been it wasn't delivered to me via an online store, so that's the only reason why I have that extra parameter.
So I think your audio dropped out there, and just to be sure that it gets captured in the live stream, the -- dangerous flag is being used because this snap was built locally and it hasn't been signed by the store. So the dangerous flag is being used to say that you know this hasn't come from the store.
Thanks, Martin. And that's it. It's installed. So if I run offline IMAP, now offline IMAP needs configuration, and it will complain when I run it and say the configuration doesn't exist. But it's very nice. It tells me where to put the configuration. As soon as I put the configuration in that location, again, and then it will run and everything's groovy. And if I wanted to at this point, I could Snapcraft push the snap to the store. In fact, I could just do that. Now, if I do that on its own, my poor internet connection is suffering a little bit here. There we go. It's now pushing that snap up to the store. And I could then choose, you mentioned channels earlier, Kyle. Did you want to talk a little bit about channels? Because I haven't mentioned channels at all.
Sure. Yeah, let me compound on that a little bit. So every snap, well, actually, let's compare it to devs for a minute. I mentioned before Snapcraft was a snap, the only way to test, other than running from source, if you're running the dev, the only way to test new releases is to switch to using the proposed archive for that snap. And so that gives you sort of a what's released and what's coming, sort of two different archives that you can use for that. Well, snaps take that a step further by making a set of 4 channels by default for every snap, which means you can now use edge of that snap and beta of that snap. And it just gives you this fine granular control over the stability that you want to be testing for each of these snaps. So there are 4 by default. In order of increasing stability, this starts with edge. That may be like, trunk, daily features that are landing like it is for Snapcraft. Every pull request that lands in a master ends up in edge. And then there's beta. That's when things in edge start stabilizing a little bit, you're moving towards a release, you start putting things in beta. Then there's candidate. obviously like a release candidate. You're ready to release, you want some testing, you put it in candidate. Finally, there is stable, which is the most stable channel where you put your releases, and people who just want to use your stable version pull from that.
Awesome. So I've just run Snap Info offline IMAP, which queries the store to show the versions, the releases of my Snap that are in various channels. And you can see right down the bottom, it says Edge has master, which is release 29, which is the one that I actually that's one I've done previously, but because I just uploaded revision 33, but I didn't specify a channel to release it to, it's currently sat there waiting for me to release it. So I could use Snapcraft to release 33 of offline IMAP into the store. And this is just a number that increments every time you push a new snap to the store, right?
Excellent.
Right. So the version you specify in the YAML is really just for human consumption. It's not a Debian version that Snap uses to determine, which one is newer than the other. The way that's determined is when you push a snap to the store assigns it a revision that is just an increasing integer, and the highest revision is the latest one.
Sweet.
And this is useful because it means that version numbers in the traditional sense are arbitrary now. And it also means you can roll backwards and forwards with your snap releases. And you don't have to rebuild in order to roll back. So if you've got a revision in the store and that was fine, and you've made some horrific mess of your application and it's now in puce instead of light blue, you can simply move the revision for the previously known good version to the stable channel, and everyone will get that update and effectively roll back to that version.
Awesome. Okay, thanks guys. I think that's enough for my demo. We've got another demo lined up. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, you can join our Rocket Chat server, rocket.ubuntu.com, and ask questions in #Snapcraft, and we'll have a look at those after the next demo, which I think, Martin, you've got a cool demo to show as well.
I have. So again, it's another Python application, and it has a couple of different characteristics to what Alan's just shown us. So the application I'm going to be showing is YouTube DL, which is a Python application that can download videos from YouTube. Unlike offline IMAP, which is pure Python, so it only requires Python and Python libraries, YouTube DL has a dependency or a requirement on a system library or a system application, and that is FFmpeg. So what we're going to show here is how what you can't do with something like virtual env, which Python developers will be familiar with. You can actually put in your snap, you can bundle your Python application and its system requirements. So I'll just switch to my terminal, and I'll bring up my YAML for that. Hopefully you can see my screen. So here's the YAML. Alan's already described the metadata that describes the version and what have you. And again, I'm using strict confinement here. Might not have to for this. There might be a case for using a different confinement model, but strict is what we're going for. And then we have one part, which is YouTube DL, which, as you can see, grabs its source from a tarball, which is hosted on GitHub. Now, you'll notice I've got a variable in this URL here, Snapcraft project version, and that is taken from the version keyword that we've got at the top of the file here. So if you want to minimize the number of edits you need to make to your Snapcraft YAML when new versions come out, you can embed that placeholder, and then you just update the version in one place at the top of the YAML file.
Nice.
And again, we're using the Python plugin, and unlike Alan, we're specifying that we're using Python version 3. And then the way that we're providing FFmpeg is interesting. So we're using the after step here, and we're saying after FFmpeg. Now in Alan's example, there was another part for his after step, and there you'll notice there isn't an FFmpeg part here, and that's because this is a cloud part. So there is a repository of additional libraries and utilities that exist as prefabricated parts in the cloud. And we'll discuss those in more detail in a later show. But what this does is it instructs this part to go and build FFmpeg and bundle it in the snap alongside all of the Python pieces it requires. And then just like Alan's, we have an application stanza and we have one application for YouTube DL. And then we have some interfaces that open up the confinement. And we won't go into interfaces too much in this presentation today, but this enables us to access the home directory, enable us to access the network as a client, also to bind a socket on the network, and also optionally access the any removable media, so things like USB sticks and things of that nature. So that's the YAML. And I've elected to build this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to use Snapcraft clean build, and we'll kick that off and get that running now. And off we go. So
that was different. That's I just did Snapcraft. So what's the difference between me doing just Snapcraft on its own and you doing Snapcraft clean build?
Okay, so what clean build does is it provisions a LXD container, and then it does all of the Snapcraft building inside that LXD container. Now, there's a number of benefits to that. I'll touch on the first one, which is by building inside the LXD container, the product Snap has been built in this clean room environment. Whereas when you just executed Snapcraft, any additional repositories you may have added to your host operating system, packages that exist in those repositories may have made their way into the Snap. So by using clean build, it's clean. Now, Kyle, I know that you've got some other examples of why using clean build is advantageous.
Yeah, well, so what we're working on in Snapcraft is actually doing this by default, but not quite as clean, reusable containers. And the benefit there is then you don't need to run strictly on Ubuntu. You could really run it anywhere. So if we start building in containers by default, then it really doesn't matter where you're running. As long as you can spin up a LXD Ubuntu container, you can still use the Ubuntu archive and still build snaps the way you're used to, and it would be totally transparent to you.
So does that mean someone could run Snapcraft on other Linux distributions and maybe even on other operating systems that are not Linux?
Well, yes, as long as at least in this rendition, right, you have LXD available, which is also available as a snap, by the way. Let's see, what was I? No, forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
So this means that the only requirements to build your snaps is to actually support snaps. In snapcraft.io, there's a link with all the supported distros right now, and we're working on supporting a lot more distros. So if you support snaps, then you install LXD from the snap, you install Snapcraft from the snap, and you can build your snaps using this clean build that Martin showed.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to say now. This is not our only cross distro story for Snapcraft, because it limits your dependencies to ones that are in Ubuntu, right? This still keeps it sort of Ubuntu specific. We're still working on abstracting the stage packages and build packages so that they can be based on RPMs, for example. So you can actually run Snapcraft natively on Red Hat or CentOS and actually use RPM dependencies. So that's another story we're working on as well. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Nice.
A very important point is that, well, you saw how simple packaging your application is, but Alan also showed how simple publishing is. So we want to automate packaging, automate delivery, and then you will be building your snaps automatically from your CI system. You can build from Travis CI, you can build from Circle CI. We have build.snapcraft.io that will do it all for you. Or if you have more complex use cases, you can use Launchpad. But what you have in those environments is a clean machine where you will need to start building things. So before you push that, you need to make sure that all your dependencies are specified on the Snapcraft YAML. And here's where clean build is very useful, because your development machine is always dirty with a lot of packages. Maybe there's a dependency that's installed on your machine, but it's not specified on the YAML. In your machine, it will work, but in your CI, it will fail. So test it first on clean build, then push it to automatic continuous delivery.
Great. How's that build coming along, Martin?
Well, this has to build FFmpeg, obviously, so we're partway through building that. I could have a little Blue Peter moment here and stop the build and install the snap that I prepared earlier. So we'll do that, I think.
So you'll notice there at the very end, I don't know if you saw, when you hit Control-C, it cleans up the LXD container afterwards. Which
actually leads me to a little piece of advice. There are times you want a clean environment like clean build, but you want to be able to iterate on it. Just spin up a new LXD container yourself and install Snapcraft there and use it there. I do that all the time.
So that's certainly one option. Another option, if you do Snapcraft clean build and is it -- debug, if the build fails, it drops you into the LXD container that the build was done in. So you'll get a fresh one, but once the build runs, if it fails, it drops you in there so you can debug the build in the container.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So you finished now, Martin?
Yeah, I've just installed the snap that was built earlier, and I'm just picking a choice video from YouTube. Everyone wants to download this one. So now if I do which that, you can see that YouTube DL is the snap, and we'll paste in the URL, and that will now use YouTube DL to download. So hopefully what we've shown here is that if you're using virtual env, Python application installation instructions can be complex. They can have lines that say apt install these things, now pip install these things, or maybe now create a virtual env and put all of these things in here because we're going to put newer stuff in that might conflict with your host operating system. What we've done with the snap here is we've taken all of the Python bits that we need and any system library and application requirements we need, and they're all bundled together. So now your user documentation can be a very simple snap install YouTube DL. Don't have to worry about what other requirements are needed. Everything's in that one bundle.
Nice. And so at this point, you could like test that snap out on your machine, or do as I did and like push to the store, and then people could test that out from the Edge channel, and then go through the other channels.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sweet. Carl, Leo, any comments about the awesome work Martin has just done there?
Well, just Kyle mentioned the stages that were running on Alan's snap, and then Martin showed the snap that it's a lot slower because one part is very big and it takes a lot of time compiling. One nice thing is that once you have that part built, you can change the other parts, and Snapcraft will just rebuild the parts that changed, and you will not have to do the same process over and over again. And we are always working on improving this scenario where you have slow building parts and you don't want to clean all of them. You want to maybe modify one step of one part, and Snapcraft is trying to be smart about it, not making you wait a long time always.
Yeah, I think part of that is partly motivated by the fact that some of our core Snapcraft team live in places where connections aren't fantastic, and so we're quite motivated to make these things work quite well.
Yeah. And there is some advice that I can give now that would help people even without a really good rebuild story like what we're working on. Leo mentioned, for example, using the YouTube DL snap was a good one. You've got two parts really, FFmpeg and then YouTube DL itself, right? FFmpeg takes forever, and And that's nothing that Martin needed to change in his snap. He just needed to build and put into his snap. So if he wasn't using clean build, which starts a new container every time, he could run Snapcraft once, and let's say he needed to make a change to the YouTube DL part. Instead of running Snapcraft clean and running Snapcraft again, you can just do Snapcraft clean YouTube DL, which leaves FFmpeg totally built and primed and everything, change it as needed, and run Snapcraft again, and FFmpeg doesn't change at all. It doesn't even, it knows that it already built, staged, and primed, and it won't touch it. So there are some things like that to consider. There's also, maybe you've got one part that is really big to pull down from the internet, and you're working on the stage keyword or the prime keyword, working on these steps to make sure that the snap only contains exactly what you need. Well, then instead of running Snapcraft clean, which will make you pull again once you're ready to run, just clean back to the build step with Snapcraft clean --s step equals build, and it won't clean what was already pulled. So then when you run Snapcraft again, it just picks up on the build step. So there are some ways to make that a little bit less painful.
So there was a lot of command line switches there. So what help option would I do for Snapcraft if I wanted to learn more about those particular features?
I would start with just Snapcraft help. We just recently changed. Hyphen help. We just changed the argument parser, so I'm still getting used to the new ways of things. But if you run that, you'll see all the commands that you have available, and then you can run Snapcraft subcommand like Snapcraft build --hyphen help, and you'll see some examples of how to use that and what. So that will show you examples of how to build one part instead of building everything, for example.
Right. Cool.
Or in the cleaning case, right? Snapcraft clean --hyphen help.
Perfect. Thank you, Martin. Anything more to add on your YouTube DL?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all the points there.
Sweet. Thanks for that. So moving on, we set aside a little bit of time for some Q&A. And Leo, I think you've got some questions from the Rocket Chat channel. Are there any interesting ones we've got time to deal with?
Yeah, there's people joining the Rocket channel, which is very nice because we hang there all day. So you can ask questions during the day, and if you want to get started packaging, we can help. So we have one from D-Lynch3. He says, I'm wondering if the multiple stages in the snap.yaml they discussed might help with a build problem I'm having. My project has a setup.cfg, and it is poisoning the Snapcraft build in that it's wrongly being applied to all the Python package dependencies. Well, it depends a lot on your project. I see you on Rocket, so I will take a look in more detail later. But yeah, the stages are split precisely because of that. We have a pull stage where you download everything. We have a build stage where it's compiled, or in the case of Python, some things are downloaded and copied to the final snap. We have a keyword between pull and build called prepare, and maybe your solution could be to remove your CFG file in the prepare stage, or maybe modify it to fit what you want. I don't know. We will have to look at your specific case, but it's doable. The idea of Snapcraft is that it has to be flexible enough to fit any kind of crazy build systems. So we are ready for almost everything out there.
That's a very good point. We should set aside some time in one of these office hours to talk about those ways in which you can override the build process within Snapcraft, because we've certainly had to use that in some other projects. So we'll that's quite a big topic, I think, and can use up a lot of time. So we'll set aside some time in the future office hours. But obviously, if you have specific questions, you can jump on Rocket Chat and ask those.
The current name for those keywords, there are three. It's prepare, install, and build. Leo, if you could just find the scriptlets documentation and paste that in the chat for D Lynch to look at. And what you'd be able to do is use the prepare keyword to simply remove the setup.cfg, as Leo says. And yeah, I think coming back to this capability of what they enable you to do is embed shell code in the YAML that gets executed at that point in the snap process. So you can sed files or remove files, or after the fact move files around if that's what's required, or completely override the build process. So it's a very powerful feature and gives complete flexibility.
Well, and snaps, what I've noticed in helping people is snaps are a bit of a lower barrier to entry than some other packaging methods. And I find a surprising number of projects are wanting to be snapped that have no build system whatsoever, not even a make file. They just have a README saying, run G++. And using those scriptlets, the prepare, build, install, you can totally drive that, even though it has no build system in its tree. So that's another use case that's supported by that.
That's awesome. Any other questions? We've got time maybe for one more question.
So the other one is about documentation, but Kyle was already mentioned the help system. Well, let me read it. This one is for Bashful Robot. Not sure if this is appropriate for this episode. So well, first, everything is appropriate. We are here to answer your questions, whatever they may be. So just throw them in Rocket Chat. He asks, where can people learn about plugins and leveraging? I don't know how to say that.
That's good.
Leveraging the LXD containers, or is it as simple as using the clean build option? And well, we have the help system in Snapcraft. We encourage you to just try the commands. We are trying to design a system that's very usable. It's hard on a CLI, but we are trying. So if you have complaints, let us know and we will try to improve. And yes, you have a YAML, you run Snapcraft clean build. If you have a LXC installation available, it will just trigger the container for you. It will do everything, and if it's successful, it will throw it away. So it's just that simple. We also have this site, tutorials.ubuntu.com, that has a section specific for Snapcraft. So if you are getting started and this all seems a little complex, you can start with the first tutorial, which explains a very simple snap, the plugin concepts, and all of those things. And we are adding more tutorials about complex scenarios. And we welcome contributions from the community. So if you learned to do something with Snapcraft and you want to write a tutorial, let us know, and we will guide you on how to make it available for everybody else.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Leo. We're just about out of time. Any other final closing comments from anyone before we wrap up?
Yes, I have a big one. I mentioned earlier that we are releasing 2.32, and it will be great if you can help us. Like if you want to learn how to make a snap, install 2.32 and learn with 2.32, and things should go well. But if there are problems, you will save us a lot of time before making our own release. We will be all day today working on rocket.ubuntu.com on this. So it's also a perfect time to get started, ask more questions, and we will guide you through all the details to start contributing.
Yes, unlike you folks in the UK, it is the beginning of the day for us.
Yeah, I'm not watching the clock or anything, but it's we do need to wrap up. So thank you guys for joining us for this first Snapcraft office hours. We're doing these regularly at this time every Friday, every other Friday?
Every other Friday, yeah.
Every other Friday.
2 weeks.
Great. And if you want to find out when they are, get reminded of all that kind of stuff, the best thing to do is to follow us on Twitter. So twitter.com/snapcraftio, or you can subscribe to this YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/snapcraftio. We'll put an event in there for next time, and you can join us there if you've got any questions. If you can't join us at the time. You can always look at the video, which is archived on YouTube. But if you're not around to ask a question, but you want to, you can always jump on Rocket Chat, rocket.ubuntu.com, and rocket.ubuntu.com. Join the Snapcraft channel and ask your questions in there. And these guys are always in there.
Happy to help.
Thanks very much, guys. I'll see you at the next time and see you out there in Rocket Chat.
Thanks a lot, Bobby.
Right,
You are a great host. See you later.